dots. It's normally there on the
And
board.
three dots.
It's ongoing, it's done. It's okay, mine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Léonard. Okay, so Léonard is wonderful and you are all wonderful. So thank you so much. So welcome to day 5 of the International Energy Poverty Action Week. As a reminder, this is the first ever International Energy Poverty Action Week. It was launched only a few weeks ago. And we had very, very interesting and relevant conversations so far about the situation in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America too. We have partners from all around the world. And today we're going to be focusing on the situation in Africa, and in particular on how boosting access to clean energy really enables sustainable development. So just to set the scene, basically Africa suffers from what's called an energy access gap. So about 600 million people don't have access to electricity for a total of population of 1.2 billion. So about half of the population don't have access to electricity. Knowing that the demographic are pushing also for a greater number of people to have this access, with the 40% of the population which is aged 15 years old and younger. Overall, the large urban areas are connected to the electricity grids, but the problem is that the supply is often very unreliable. You have a lot of blackouts, for instance, especially when the temperature are going up. And a lot of the electricity coming from the grid comes from non-renewable energy sources. One of the enormous problems too is the air pollution. In 2019, it was estimated that about 1.1 million premature deaths across Africa happened because of air pollution. And air pollution is often a consequence of the cooking habits, for instance, with the non-performing wood or coal. So overall, we have to acknowledge that access to clean energy is really a springboard for human development, because it will really simplify the access to drinking water, social services, health or education, employment, etc. So our speakers today will focus on those different aspects and how really make sure that how to fill this energy access gap. Overall, it's really important to acknowledge that energy access goes really beyond the number of grid connections, because there are, for instance, off-grid solutions with solar PV. What matters is also the quality and quantity of grid electricity, the way upstream electricity projects are designed, but also clean cooking solutions and energy for community facilities and productive engagements are really critical. One of the key tools that is used to measuring electricity access is called the multi-tier framework, which basically defines the various level of electricity access, with level 0 corresponding to 0 electricity. Level 1, you can recharge your phone and use a light bulb. Level 2, you can use a ventilator or maybe a radio. Level 3, well, you get to something a little bit stronger, like a fridge. Level 4, you get to ovens or even air conditioning or pumps. And level 5, it's really like the industrial uses that you can make of electricity. Our speakers today are Léonard Lévêque of Lipré, Suzanne Onyango of the Geothermal Village, Hanna Klein of Gigawatt Global, Mokhtar SELLAMI of the Algeria Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, and I'm the host, Cornelis from Next Energy Consumer. So thank you, and I wish everyone a very good discussion. Léonard, if you want, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marine. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Léonard, based in France, working for a consulting company that is leading a major program whose name is LIPARI, the Long-Term Euro-African Partnership on Renewable Energy. Actually, I'm not an energy expert, but I'm a program manager, and in this panel we are counting on 2 partners that are actually in charge of implementing many activities in the framework of this program. So Mokhtar SELLAMI, who is also the president of the Lipari Program General Assembly, and Susan Onyango, who is based in Kenya and who is involved in a dedicated project focusing on geothermal capacities. So I would like to give a quick overview of the overall program so that you can better understand what we are addressing. So actually, Lipari comes from a mutual commitment from the African Union and European Union to action in renewable energy by adopting a roadmap on climate change and sustainable energy, the CCICE roadmap. And this roadmap is setting priorities and actions for jointly developed research and innovation agenda on climate change and sustainable energy. So the ambition, the overarching ambition of Lipari program is to develop a joint strategic framework for collaboration on research and innovation in the field of sustainable energy. To do so, the idea is to focus on a framework that is jointly developed, jointly owned, and jointly governed by the African and the European partners. So basically, it means that all the activities are co-led or co-implemented by a European partner and an African partner. And the long-term ambition of such a program is to formalize into a long-term partnership the needs for this renewable energy infrastructure. So this Lipari program aims at reducing fragmentation by aligning the existing bilateral and multilateral frameworks. So that's why it's a very large-scale inclusive consortium, because we are counting on 83 partners present in 36 countries, and also 2 international organizations. So to ensure a broad thematic, geographical, and stakeholder coverage, and to demonstrate the feasibility of the collaboration in the view of this long-term partnership that aims at addressing the post-period, the post-2025 period. So this program is coming from let's say, is drawing on the experience of a past one who was Lipari, which formalized and developed this framework for a long-term and bi-regional cooperation in research and innovation. So basically, these are the location of our partners. So this program is co-led by my organization, LGI, and the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa. These are the main partners involved in the program implementation, so the 83 partners that are consortium members of Lipari. The main objectives of such a program are the following. First, it's to demonstrate the efficiency of this program and to create the conditions for the long-term partnership. Also, to demonstrate the efficiency and attractiveness of joint programming and joint calls. Maybe Mokhtar will have the possibility to come into that point later on, because he is mainly involved in the management of such a joint programming method. We also address the mobilization of relevant African and European knowledge communities. We try to contribute to the production of new knowledge, innovations, technology, and so on in the field of renewable energy. And finally, to accelerate the inclusive transition to reliable and affordable renewable energy. So what you have to keep in mind is that this long-term Euro-African partnership on renewable energy is a program designed as a pilot for a future long-term partnership. So it is structured according to 3 pillars. So I won't spend a lot of time to focus on that. Just for the ones who know a bit about the European projects organization, there is a first pillar that is dedicated to demonstrate the joint programming and joint funding because in this pillar, which is an ERANET-like, so it's a program in which national and regional agencies are jointly programming and jointly funding projects, along with the support of the European Commission funding from the grant. So the aim of such a first pillar is to coordinate, but also cluster, and finally to monitor the impact of the project that will be funded. Actually, 13 projects are going to be funded. They will start in the following months. And also the other ambition of Pillar 1 is to build a community and a methodology that set the foundation of the so-called long-lasting partnership in order, once more, to address the post-2025 challenges. You may have understood that the project will be finished by 2025. It started in October 2020, and the project duration, the program duration, is 5 years. So these are the main agencies, both national or regional, that are involved in the Pillar 1 management. So mainly it's national agency, ministry, and sometimes universities. But these are the different typologies of structures involved in the Pillar 1. When it comes to Pillar 2, actually, it's more like a research and innovation action. If you are familiar with Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, so it's a fundamental research part of the program, where 8 projects are implemented by consortium partners. So basically, it is the core of the consortium, because 70 partners are involved in the management of the second pillar. And they are focusing on multi-annual roadmaps that have been designed during the pre-LIPRI implementation, and that are focusing on the following topics. So it is the slide that is currently displayed. So I'm not going to read it. I give it to you. Just you have to bear in mind that these 8 projects, they are in this pillar under the form of work packages, and they all deal with the main needs that have been identified in the multi-annual roadmap definition. So it's mainly referring to resource assessment, electricity generation in rural areas, and modern cooking solutions at different levels. Among these 8 projects, 5 of them are referring to research, and 3 of them are referring to innovation. So, for instance, there is a first one focusing on research, which is focusing on the assessment of geothermal research, which goal is to create a geothermal atlas for Africa. Oh, let me pasting a link on the chat in order you can access directly the information of these work of these projects. So these are work packages, but I don't want to use the term because it's bureaucratic, so it's projects. So here you can reach the more detail on these 8 projects and the technology field they are focusing on. So the first one, the Geothermal Atlas for Africa, aims at defining the original location of low to high enthalpy geothermal resources for the development of African electricity production. The PURAMS project is focusing on modern cooking technologies through the development of a pilot and a socioeconomic model of standalone solar electric cook stoves mainly for women in rural markets in Africa to reduce their exposure to harmful pollutants from biomass cooking. So it's related to what you previously presented a mine by introducing on the air pollution. The work package, the project geothermal village in which Suzanne will come in afterwards is focusing on rural electrification, so the development of 3 complementary projects focusing on the investigation of the potential use of a mix of locally exploited resources to design and implement solutions, but that are mainly based on geothermal options, and also social plans for application in order to have the wider impact on the community. But I'm sure that Suzanne will come in afterwards. We have also a project that is focusing on the role of productive use of energy for agricultural needs by promoting the integration of modeling experience on the energy, water, and agricultural nexus. What is very interesting also in this project is that they have a lot of activities to manage that are related to business model and to support the private smallholder farmers in the countries involved in this project. And finally, the last project that is directly linked with research is dealing with the comprehensive modeling approach for sustainable hybrid mini-grid systems, mainly applying to African rural contexts, including technological systems, digital technology integration, energy planning for demand, and resource assessment. They also focus on the business and delivery model development. And finally, we have we have 3 projects that are focusing on. Oh wait, I forgot that I have some slides to display. So basically, these are the ones I just mentioned, and these are the ones I'm going to introduce now. No, it's not exactly that. So the first project dealing with innovation is related to smart standalone solutions for rural areas by testing and implementing components for renewable energy systems. We also have a project that is dealing with smart off-grid and on-grid combined solutions for renewable energy microgrid in African context. So I think Marine will be able to present it because she is a partner within this project, with our private company Audit-E leading this project. And finally, the last project related to innovation is dealing with the installment of renewable energy containers that aim at testing and optimizing a transportable renewable energy solution for off-grid electrification applied to mainly a rural location in Africa.
Léonard, can you move to the next slide, because you were mentioning.
Yeah, actually, I did not follow the presentation. So I won't go further in the detail of the projects. Just to let you know that all these projects are in the second pillar. I mentioned the first pillar, in which the funding agencies are involved. And all this infrastructure is relying on management and strategic capacities. So there is a third pillar which aims at addressing the outreach of the project to ensure the good communication of it, and also to address the long-term perspective on the way to maximize the program outputs, outcomes, and impacts, and also in the view of building the long-term partnership beyond the implementation of LIPARI. So as a conclusion, I could say that this program, which is considered as a flagship program by the European Commission, can be seen as a pilot for a long-term partnership. And we hope that by the end of the program in 2025, we will transfer all the assets to a future partnership. And we hope that something will remain. So maybe it will be a new organization, a funding organization. But I think that in the short term, we are going to build and animate an international community between Europe and Africa on renewable energy, and you are more invited to be part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Léonard, for this presentation of the LIPRE program. So you have in the chat what LIPRE is. And I thought it was really important to showcase this program because of the kind of long-term ideas that are behind and how this kind of program can really trigger some changes. I see Marielle is nodding, so she will have the really big task to wrap the week later. So yeah, just keep on taking notes, Marielle. Right now, I would like to leave the floor to Mokhtar SELLAMI. Mokhtar, I'm going to share the screen, my screen, your presentation on my screen. If you want to speak, if you have any problem, I have a recording of your presentation, okay?
No,
but it's okay, perfect. So let me share this. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, that's okay. First, thank you, Marie. Thank you, Léonard. You facilitate my presentation, Léonard. Thanks. Dear attendees, good afternoon. I'm Mokhtar SELLAMI. I'm professor in computer science. But since 2008, I joined the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, where I'm in charge of technology development and innovation and scientific cooperation. Let's say that I had the chance to participate to the creation and the launching of the African Union, European Union partnership in the high-level policy dialogue, where I'm still a member, to senior official meetings and so on. And of course, I managed many projects, including the bilateral cooperation between Algeria and the European Union. Coming to the presentation, to the introduction made by Marine, I would like just to add and briefly that access to modern and clean energy services is really fundamental for achieving the SDGs. What I want to complement that is African continents account for about 3% of the global energy consumption, but 59% of this total energy consumed is from biomass. This leads to high levels of deforestation, biodiversity loss, and health risk from air pollution. And in this energy crisis, women and children are the most affected as they are in charge of supplying their households to meet domestic energy needs. There are many obstacles to overcome this situation. We made a benchmark, and all African countries have policy in renewable energy. But what we can say that there is an inadequate policy and lack of implementation of existing strategy in many African countries. There is a difference between making a plan and to make it concrete. There is also a poor market for renewable energy products, lack of skilled labor to develop the energy sector. And there is also, unfortunately, a lack of awareness in advances in renewable energy technology. In the African Union, European Union strategy, a comprehensive roadmap for a jointly funded research and innovation partnership on climate change and sustainable energy was adopted by the HLPD senior official meeting in October 2017.
We are not seeing the presentation here, excuse me. Go on.
We don't see the slides.
And it was officially launched by the Abidjan summit of November of the same year. Thank you for the slide. The partnership supports actions in renewable energy, energy efficiency, as well human capital, capacity building, open data, and open access. Of course, the flagship program is LIPRE, presented by Léonard. Let's say just that presently we have 8 internal projects which are running since 1 year, but we have 13 new projects which were selected last January 2022 and will be launched in the next coming months. They are, this project involve 83 partners coming from 8 European countries and 9 African countries. The global funding budget is 10 million euros, with 2.5 million euros coming from the European Commission. This project, you see the scope of the call already mentioned by Léonard, but let's say that this project targets to develop both hard and software solutions to support the integration of renewable in the electricity grid in health and cooling systems. More precisely, by example, in Pillar 1, we have projects on solar cooking systems. We have projects on microgrids, application for agriculture, farm electrification, for disinfection for clean water. We have also projects in biomass conversion into bioenergy, but also advanced research on hydrogen for power supply in Africa, high performance of solar cells, end of life and second life management by recycling, batteries and photovoltaic panels, and so on. That's just to introduce the area of the overall environmental impact. However, in addition to the mostly applied science needs in these areas, basic research might still be needed for technology development. Then, as you see in this slide, in the map in the right, they represent all partners of free play, including partners from Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. And another aspect we consider for all these partners is about the training of African personnel on renewable energy technologies, which is an important aspect considered in LIPRE, and workshops will be organized together researchers in some topics to facilitate networking, collaboration, and exchange of good practices. Next slide, please, and maybe the last slide. Yes, just yes, thank you. To see that we have capacities in Africa in research. This map is it represents the capacities in research. It's realized from data from Web of Science, and they include high important paper, and we can see that we have clusters. We have many important clusters in research. It's the first one, let's say, it's in South Africa with KwaZulu-Natal with the University of Pretoria, but also North Africa with Egypt with the Cairo University. We have in Morocco, in Algeria, in Tunisia, in Nigeria, and so on. And there is a link, but we need to strengthen this network and to move from academic research to innovation. And it's my slide, my last slide, which is indicating some experience and some prototypes developed, important prototype development in research centers and so on. But there is
pour avoir franchi les voies sans autorisation des amendes qui peuvent atteindre jusqu'à plusieurs milliers d'euros.
Hanna France aussi dans ce journal, voilà, qui fait du bien. Le congé de carnaval est...
Sorry, I was listening in the radio. I know the information about what is happening in the world is important, but our seminar too. So just to finalize that, there is an effort to find and to involve private partner for the development and for the commercialization of the products. And I finished by, I recall what we call in the TRL, at the technology readiness level, the valley of death, the valley of death, that it means that we have many projects in many countries who are just waiting for valorization. Thank you to all of you. I'm available for any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mokhtar. It was very, very interesting and very important to recall that there are so many great things happening in Africa, and they deserve to be showcased. They deserve to be presented. And I think it's also the goal of a platform like the International Energy Poverty Action Week to just make sure that we are all aware of the different opportunities that exist, because there are synergies that can be created at different levels. It's exactly the discussion I had with Dr. Helena Klein, who will speak last. But in the meantime, I would like to welcome Susan Onyango, who is from Kenya, and she's been implementing the geothermal village. I'm going to share my screen. Susan, if you ever have a problem with your presentation, I also have the recording, so just let me know if that's okay, everything is okay with you. And please, to all the guests, just keep your microphone shut, because yes, we could hear somebody's had the TV on, so yeah. Susan, are you here with me? Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen right now. Here, can you see it? Can you confirm, everyone? Yeah, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you. Okay, so Suzanne,
You are muted, Marine.
yeah, Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Okay, good. It's good afternoon, I guess, for everybody now, even the people in Europe. Good afternoon, everyone. So as you've heard, my name is Susan Onyango. I work for an organization called Geo2D, and I'm very happy to be here today to present some of my experiences with geothermal development in Africa. Next, please. The next slide. So just very quickly, Geo2D is a French organization whose overall objective is to promote the use of sustainable use of geothermal, of geological resources. My talk today will focus on the aspect of small-scale solutions, and then I will also talk a bit about community empowerment as one of the key topics, because that's something that we highlight in the approach that we use with the geothermal village project that I'm going to talk about. So therefore, as I've said, I'll talk about the geothermal village project that is currently being implemented under EU's LIPRE, or LIPRE as it's called, program, and community empowerment issues. How we intend to use community empowerment as an approach in the geothermal village project. Next one, please. So very quickly to talk about the geothermal village concept and its relation to the geothermal village project. The geothermal village project, we usually call it GV1 in short. It's being implemented on the platform of the geothermal village concept. The geothermal village concept was conceptualized by Dr. Jacques Varret of Geo2D in 2012 to address existing gaps in classical geothermal development that target large-scale geothermal projects, which are characteristically respond to national grid needs. The first publication on this subject was in 2014 by Varret et al. The motivation behind the geothermal village concept can be traced back to Jacques Varret's stay in Ethiopia in the Afar region, which is in northern part of Afar, northern part of Ethiopia, often said to be the hottest place on the planet Earth. Therefore, very hot and very arid also, very dry. And he stayed there between 1967 and 1976, when it happened that famine claimed many human and livestock lives. And this was despite the abundance of geothermal resources in Afar that could and actually can be used to contribute to food security. So the concept is designed to sustainably answer from a gender perspective. That's very important for us. The gender perspective is a very important issue, and it's part of the innovation that we come with in the aspect of geothermal development. So the concept is designed to sustainably answer from a gender perspective the socioeconomic needs, such as food security and water access of local populations living around geothermal sites, more so in the context of the current climate change. Next slide, please. That's a diagrammatic representation of the geothermal village. It's a concept that's supposed to respond to the socioeconomic needs of local populations, depending on the context. So if it could be fish farming, it could be irrigated agriculture, it could be small-scale industrial activities, and so on. And maybe just very quickly to mention that with the geothermal village concept, what we try to do is to have an approach whereby the geosciences, the engineering sciences, and the social sciences work very closely together. And this also is new. It's a part of the innovation, because what has been happening is that in geothermal development, especially along the Eastern Africa Rift Valley, these different domains within the geothermal development have been working in silos, you know, each domain working on its own. The outcome of our geothermal village concept and the project that we're implementing, we hope to have feasibility studies and to come up with implementation strategies that improve the current approach to geothermal development. And the project geothermal village and even the geothermal village concept is based on a criteria that looks at local community needs, lifestyles, and capacities, that looks at the type of income sources of these local communities, and that tries very hard to come up with technology that are appropriate to the level of the community on site, so that the communities can be able to master the technology and later on to be able to sustainably manage the projects. Next slide, please. I quickly talk about the geothermal. Okay, I continue a bit about the geothermal village concept. And that's to say that it involves shallow drilling in near surface geothermal systems with cascading use of geothermal energy, which can be used for electric production where there is high temperature fluids, to thermal direct uses where there's low temperature fluids. So along the Rift Valley, the African Rift Valley, you have places where there's high temperature and places where there's low temperature. So the geothermal village concept is actually conceptualized to take into account these different geographical features. And this is done through organic ranking cycle systems. We often call them ORCs. ORCs, if I explain that a bit, are standalone, flexible, and portable production modules for small applications of between 20 to 200 kilowatts. And these are sizes small enough adapted to the needs and production requirements of target populations. I think I already talked about this, but I can just very quickly mention some of the socioeconomic activities that can be developed through the geothermal village concept. They include fish farming, they include spas, they include greenhouses, irrigated agriculture. It can be used for cooling, It can be used for drying, preservation of food through drying of fruits, of fish, of meat, refrigeration, small-scale industrial activities. So really a very compact way of addressing socioeconomic needs of local populations. Next slide, please. I talked about Dr. Jacques Varret, who is the brain behind the geothermal village concept. That's him in the 1970s in Afar with the part of the local population. If you notice, the two men next to him are holding some tools, so to speak. Those are some metallic tools that the local community, even then, were using to somehow exploit the geothermal resources on their land to be able to access water. And so it's important to also mention that even now, those local populations have a way in which they already use these resources, but it's in very artisanal ways. In the current context of climate change, we feel it's important to try to improve these artisanal ways of using the geothermal resources. Next slide, please. An example, I talked about low temperature and high temperature systems. That's just a very quick example, diagrammatic example, where on one part of the Rift Valley, Eastern Africa Rift Valley, you have high temperature, very well adapted for electricity production. On the other side, you have low temperature, very well adapted for direct use, and direct users, so to speak, are those things which I've talked about, like fish drying, agriculture, irrigated agriculture, and so on. So the point here is that with the geothermal village concept, you can have different approaches depending on the context that you are looking at, but the scientific and social approach is the same, and the technologies are also adapted to the local context. Next slide, please. Kindly move on to the next slide. An example of the organic ranking as ORC that I talked about. As you can see, it's a machine, a system that's quite small, very well adapted to small-scale electric production. It's something that can easily fit even on the back of a pickup. And this is unlike the large-scale geothermal projects that we've had so far. I didn't get into details into that, but actually with the large geothermal village projects, we even have cases where local communities have had to be relocated or to be displaced from their lands to create room for geothermal development. And this comes with a lot of negative social impact that I will not get into at the moment, but includes disenfranchisation of families, of communities, just so many things. I won't get into details about that now. Next slide, please. A quick example of something I've already mentioned, just a diagrammatic example. You see here, for example, if you are talking about low temperature, a low temperature system at 30 degrees, for example, you can have aquaculture. At 40 to 50 degrees, you could have greenhouses. As you move closer to 50 to 65, you can have cooling. As you move higher to 70s, you can have drying of fruits. Higher on, you can have drying of fish, drying of other things. You can even have refrigeration at around 120 degrees centigrade. So it's a question of what's the existing economic activity of the community on the ground, and also what's the characteristic of the geothermal resource on ground. Next one, please. I won't get into too much detail about that because actually Léonard has already talked about it. We have, but I'll just very quickly say that in the LEAP-RE's Geothermal Village 1 project, which I've already said the geothermal village concept is based on. We have 14 partners. That's the list of the 14 partners. 7 of them are from Africa. Important for me to mention that this includes 2 community-based geothermal community-based organizations. I will mention them. That's the Afar Geothermal Alternative Power in Ethiopia and the Homer Hills Geothermal Community-Based Organization in Kenya. And then we also have 7 partners from Europe. So 7 from Africa, including 2 CBOs, and 7 from Europe. And the geographic scope of the geothermal village project is Kenya, Rwanda, Djibouti, and Ethiopia. So we are talking about 4 countries. Next one, please. I will again not get into too much detail on that because Léonard already mentioned, alluded to some of the issues there. But to very quickly say that under the Geothermal Village 1 project, we have 7 work packages. Most of them cut across research and development. So we have the geoscience, the social sciences, engineering sciences. As we move to work package 4, we have feasibility studies, we have research, mobility, and capacity building, and then at a point in time, we look at preparation of a geothermal village demonstration project, and then we also have project management throughout the project. What happens, the project has been organized in such a way that we have 1 co-lead, and we have 1 lead and 1 co-lead partner. And it's done in such a way that it's if a co-lead is if a lead is a European Union country, from a European Union country, then the co-lead is from an African country. So a very good way to promote that kind of intercontinental collaboration. And then the Geothermal Village 1, the objective is there. I won't talk about it because maybe I just quickly mention it so that everything ties in together, is that it's to introduce geothermal-based standalone electric and thermal energy systems to off-grid African communities. And our attempt is to do this through coming up with template case studies, demonstrating feasibility, and having appropriate technological level. Also important to say is that gender is a central pillar in the project in the same way that it is in the geothermal village concept. And maybe I will mention here that Geo2D, the organization that I work with, leads the project's gender component. Next slide, please. I'm getting to the end of my presentation, so I talk about community empowerment. And here I start by saying that sustainability is a prime factor in the geothermal village concept. And consequently, the concept has been designed such that local populations are encouraged to form geothermal community-based organizations. We then go ahead and conduct training needs assessments of the community-based organizations and to identify their capacity gaps so that relevant training can be offered to them. The idea behind the capacity building is to bring the local populations through these CBOs to a point where they can be able to sustainably run and manage a geothermal village project implemented on their land. And of course, also to promote community ownership. Very different from the way large-scale geothermal projects have been done. The community is not made central to the classical approach in geothermal development, but in the geothermal village concept, the local community is really, really at the center of all that we do. Next one, please. Just a quick one on some of the scientific papers that have been published on this subject. I don't get into details about that, but there is at least 3 slides on that. We've been publishing about this. It's taken us years of reflecting on how this geothermal village concept could be done in such a way that communities can benefit from the resource. So thank you very much for your attention. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Susan, for this very comprehensive approach to the geothermal village. It's really important to have this perspective of the local empowerment, the community empowerment, and this gender approach. Sud, who made a session yesterday on Asia, confirms that is really interesting, and it's really about learning from the different projects, the different pilots, and the different community empowerment projects that exist in different landscapes. Now I would like to welcome Dr. Helena Klein. She doesn't belong to LIPRE, so if you have any form of comment and you want to share them, it's also interesting to have your views here. And please do ask your questions in the chat. Hanna, you will be sharing your screen. Yeah, thank you.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting. I was invited to participate in this conference, I guess, to bring a different perspective of what it's like for us who are trying to build and implement both mini grids and big systems. This is a beautiful. I think it should be winning the award of the most beautiful solar plant in the world from Burundi, which finished about a year ago. But to build such a thing in these countries is not a simple thing. And I used to be, of course, in research myself. I have a PhD in solar energy, so I know very well are in a different type of world. Our biggest problem for any renewable energy is this: the fuel. In Africa, and most of Africa is far away from any ports. It is very expensive. Sometimes they have to travel inland for 2,000 kilometers on bad roads. This truck didn't make it, as we can see. So it's not just the CO2 that gets generated when you burn it, but it's also, of course, all the fuel you need to get it up to 2,000 meters elevation in the highlands of Africa, for example. And nobody talks about it, but the biggest problem in Africa is the corruption. And the biggest problem with fossil fuel in Africa is that it is something that constantly needs to come, which means it's possibilities for people to get paid. And for us who work in renewable energy business, it is a big challenge to get things done in Africa. It all has to do with the fuel. But it is very expensive, and in order to make sure that people have potentially access to electricity in this region, this balance has to be broken. So here I just see a few examples. We actually did build this. You see me first on an empty field in Burundi a few years ago, and now it's all covered with solar panels. It's wonderful and amazing, since Burundi is the poorest country officially in the world. It was not easy, I can say that. And also hydro plants, or a lot of highlands of Africa have rather small streams, but very big head as possibilities to use the difference in height. So here is part of our team, the women who helped us build the plant. So the younger women. So this is a type of world that's out here, that when you're focusing on your research and on your projects, this is the world that we meet in Mozambique, in Liberia, in Kenya, in South Sudan. All these places are looking to be electrified, either strengthening the grid, which often is not very strong, or relying, as it used to be, on hydro plants that was built during the colonial times, and they're now aging terribly, and together, of course, with the more erratic climate that we having. These countries have to do something, but often they're not very well organized or actually working against things. It's decentralized renewable energy. I know we talked about that. Also, Suzanne talked about it, how important it is to have access locally, even if you live far away up in the mountains. You should be able to have electricity generated. You should be able to use your phone as a part of a solar phone tower where we're looking to electrify. There's also possibility to have solar street lights, which also helps things radically when it comes to safety, security for people. Now, Mokhtar talked about this a bit, and that's the regulation. Regulation is a big issue. In many of these countries, the regulation is not really ready for these decentralized plants to have various versions of mini-grids, microgrids. There's no streamlined process, which makes it very expensive to implement. And that is the last thing you want for the people who live in these places. Income is the biggest issue, and the reason why they need to have electricity installed, so the wheels of economical activity can really start spinning. In some countries, there's no legal right to own private transmission lines. So if you're building a mini grid, the transmission line has to be owned by the public utility, which is not interested in at all in taking care of it, and that becomes a big issue. Another one is the lack of interest from governments to solve any of these problems. In fact, they're stalling. This is not interesting to them. They're claiming, especially with money from this type of programs that you're talking about coming in from Europe, for instance. Why should anybody pay anything for the electricity? Well, even if there is donor money coming to donate the panels, they need to be built, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be, people need to be connected, etc., etc. And there is a complete uninterest in realizing this from the politician's point of view, which is very challenging. Many of these big programs of rollouts of mini grids in Africa, unfortunately, getting stranded in that they're not allowed to implement, they're not allowed to operate because of the government will claim various things in the regulation. So they are built and they're not operating. So there is this village with a lovely mini grid installed and nobody connected. Or the other problem, which has been seen a lot in India, and we are about to see a lot of it in Africa as well, is donor money comes in. They really want to build. They really decided 45 years ago that this is for 15 mini grids. And by the time they implement, it's just enough to build a small mini grid in each place, to completely ignoring the feasibility studies of what the real problems are, which are about operation, who owns the mini grid, who will operate it, who will make sure that they have customer care, who will ensure that somebody else can join, or a welder can come to town and be connected, etc. So these are the real issues on the ground that I am seeing. And I think it's important also for your community, which is more research oriented, to just have seen that. So just give you a little example really quickly about, here is Burundi. People estimate that each household has about $3 to $4 a month to spend on electricity. Well, that is not a lot of money. Here is examples of access to electricity in Burundi. 3, 4, 5%. High percentage is 8, or right in the center of the biggest city, it is maybe over 50%. But it just shows that there's a lot of things to be done. all this research that you're doing has off takers, and this is the real world. Why existing businesses using electricity would be benefited is they have only this little panel, and that is it. So if people want to charge more phones, or they want to run several movie theaters at the same time, they really can't, because this is what they have. So that will, of course, enable business expansion and refrigeration and other things that is not really possible at this moment when you only have a small solar panel. There's also in many of these places these millers, which you would see across Africa. They're all running on diesel, but in order for them to run on electricity, they need to buy a whole new mill. So who's going to finance that? Who's going to help? There's more to it than just put up a mini grid, say thank you Europe for the donation of this money, and goodbye. There's so much. What Susanne was talking about, the community is what is important. Who is going to be, so here we see an electric mill. These are the belted diesel engines that are mostly out there. How can we actually empower these communities to get electrified, so they can buy the refrigerator for their business, they can start the mechanical workshop, they can buy the welding machine, etc. How do you do that? So it's more than just bringing it, right? The electricity is great, but who even has the right to be connected? Is it based on economic only? Then what about gender inclusion? What about indigenous population that is marginalized? It's a whole process. It's a whole process. So this boy here is a perfect example of welcome to many schools in Africa. There is no electricity. So it's only the light that comes in through the windows. And if you really want to see something, this is what you need to do. So electrification is super important, and finding cheap, easy, well-functioning solutions for all these places is paramount, because there are so many of these children, like this boy, who are sitting in school and still can't really see what they're doing, and many more who actually never really make it to school, right? Because they can't pay the little fee that is required for them to have the right clothes, etc. So, but what if we would have completely changed everything around, and there would be internet availability? You could sit in a little village in the top of a mountain in Africa and work in a call center or Zoom into something. Well, that shouldn't be too far off. These people could actually have a different type of future than they're having now. We have to keep on dreaming. We have to keep on seeing it. It isn't an impossible thing. Community life changes drastically when there is street lights, when there is some kind of lighting, so that after dark life doesn't stop. And how do we do it so it doesn't get stolen? It keeps on working. It keeps clean and good, the panel. There's a lot of different little things that is required to make a community thrive and blossom from electricity. Of course, employment, and we talked about that before, of training people, having them just being adapted to these various technical solutions. There are so much talent in Africa. There's so many intelligent and wonderfully creative people that a little bit of training, a lot of motivation will just keep on flowing. we talked about gender related impact. The role of women in the villages is mostly just homebound or as teachers, but homebound, and it means a lot of responsibilities for the farming, for the cooking, for the washing, for the fetching water and firewood, etc. These women need support. They need inclusion into the world of some convenience in order for them to be creative and to really motivate their children to go to school, to be there for the next generation. I think that's the end of my presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hanna, for reminding us of the challenges that really impact Africa. It was quite a nice way to wrap things up with the pilot project that are presented with LEAP. I'm pretty sure that all partners at LEAP are totally convinced and totally aware of the difficulty of the situation, and that's where we need really to unite our forces in order for this kind of initiative to just take off. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. In the meantime, Hanna, could you perhaps stop sharing your screen so we can see you all? Diana is asking if the presentations will be shared. Yes, and the recording will be shared too. So don't worry about that. And otherwise, drop me an email. I will share it to you as earlier if you need it. Yes. So if you have any question, please ask them in the chat. And otherwise, I have some questions for you. I first wanted to, I have a question really about, it might be a bit provocative, but it's really a question to you all, the four speakers. Do you think African-led solutions are given enough credit at the international level? Mokhtar, would you like to start?
For this question, in North Africa, we have no problem, but I would like to hear the opinion of Susan.
Susan, go ahead, please. Your microphone is off. Susan, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I keep forgetting to unmute my mic. I would say yes. And I probably say this because I'm talking from the point of view of geothermal development, whereby Geo2D and the geothermal village project, the geothermal village concept, for example, tries to promote small-scale, community-based, community-managed projects. Yeah, there's still some wait-and-see kind of situation with that. Yeah, some reluctance or some wait-and-see kind of situation with that. If I speak from the point of view of geothermal. Yeah.
Hanna, would you like to speak?
I think when it comes to the cook stoves, each country has their own cook stoves, and those, I think, is people pride themselves also a bit on their own technology. Or when it comes to Burundi, it is known that the Batwa, the Batwa tribe, an indigenous tribe, are the ones selling they make them and they sell them. They might not be the best when it comes to energy efficiency, but bringing in other cook stoves to Burundi would take away their soul completely. That this is what they do. They make these big vessels and they make these cook stoves. They would take away their source of income, and be a catastrophe. So it is a balance. It's always, you know, we as researchers want to bring in the most energy efficient solution that is cheap, easy to use, doesn't smoke, and it is all well. But underneath there is this fabric of social network that we are unaware of. But for the cook stoves, indeed, there are some real implementation in that throughout Africa, in my opinion.
Yes, the cook stove question is really important. It was yesterday in the context of Asia, because somebody said that, for instance, some cook stoves were brought to, I think it was a community in Nepal, and people never used it because they were not used to this kind of cook stove. So it was a waste of time and a waste of money because there had been no assessment of what the real needs of the people were. And for instance, in Nepal, people in that community were not used to cook outside altogether, etc. Whereas it's a reality in a lot of African countries. And I think that one of the most important aspects is to respect the person and the people and their culture and their habits in order to propose and build with them the most appropriate solution. And that's why my second question is really about scaling up, and what would be needed to scale up some kind of the small solution that were presented today, or some that you are aware of. Léonard, you mentioned that you need a continuity of funds from different partners, but maybe you have another other view or assessment. I would like, yes, Léonard, then Hanna, then Mokhtar, and then Suzanne, if you want.
Thank you, Marine. And please allow me also to come back to the previous question regarding the international level recognition. Hard for us to say no to this because we are funded by the European Commission. It's a 35 countries consortium. So by definition, actually, this program is intended to support the recognition, the identification of African research and innovation capacities. And I think that the slide presented by Mokhtar on the research and innovation capacities in Africa is very explicit. Actually, there are so many things, but maybe hard to identify. And I think, to come to the second question, that we have to think about the infrastructure to ensure the collaboration. So indeed, there is the long-term perspective, which is the ambition of our program, but it will work only if we give some good and efficient infrastructures for African and European researchers to collaborate. So I think, first of all, the most important thing is the infrastructure. It will be necessary to address this long-term perspective. And second, it's related to the business model. So it means that we have to think about the financial sustainability of the projects that we are doing, of the experimentation, the prototypes, the demonstration sites, and so on. So we have to include a reflection on the business model, and also to work, I think, in close collaboration with the private sector. So we have an activity within Lipari, which is related to the development of an innovation accelerator dealing with renewable energy. So I think it will be an opportunity to scale up some of the initiatives and prototypes that are implemented within the program.
Absolutely. Who would like to come next? Hanna, Mokhtar, maybe? Otherwise, I have another question coming from Carla in the chat. She's asking, what can we learn from the African perspective on energy issues, or things that we may have been overlooking? That would be, Carla says she's interested in answers coming from panelists who are native to the African continent. So we have Suzanne and Mokhtar who are native of the African continent, although your experience is totally different. So it would be really interesting to have your view. What do you think the rest of the world can learn from Africa, in your view? Suzanne, you're muted.
Okay, and I think my response here will be kind of linked to what I wanted to add on to what Hanna had said. I think one of the things that can be learned from Africa is to see how to build onto what is already there, what's already existing, build onto it, so that whatever we come up with is not something that is totally new and totally strange. If I talk of the geothermal village concept, for example, we go there and we try to build onto what the community is already doing. We find them that it's a community that has already been finding ways to tap the water or to condense the water. They have artisanal systems to condense the water from the geothermal resource. And the idea then is, because this usually will take long and will be probably too little for too many people, the idea then is to see how this can be done in such a way that the efficiency of what they're already doing can be built on. I think that's one way, and having the local community as the center, the center of making the decisions, not ideas that probably come from elsewhere. If you have the community at the center, that does help. And to also try to answer the question on scaling up that you raised up, I think some of the things that probably could be done is to scale up diffusion, for example, of what's happening or of good practices or what has been done, what has succeeded. And again, allow me to talk about the geothermal village concept, for example. We're hoping that once a few demonstration sites will have been implemented, that would be a good way to, if that is diffused, it would be a good way to promote scaling up. Yeah, I think that's it for now.
Yes, so putting the communities and really a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down that people will never adopt. Mokhtar, do you have any views on this?
Yes, I would like just to add that, of course, we have big difference about management of electricity and access to electricity between North Africa and Sub-Sahara. You know, in North Africa and especially in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and so on, we have a problem of energy efficiency. We have access, the rate of access to electricity is about 89%. It's very important, but there is a real problem of energy efficiency. There is a loss of efficiency and so on. Just to finish, I would like to how to say, just to welcome a big initiative we have in Africa today. Is the launch of production of electricity in Ethiopia. I think Africa will change with this new energy, despite some problem about water with Egypt, Sudan, and so on. But it's, this initiative will surely change the situation in Africa.
Yeah, so it's a hope that we have that those kind of solutions can have a long-term impact. Because one of the questions coming from the chat was, are off-grid solutions sustainable, or are they going to stay long-term? What are your views? Hanna, maybe that would be interesting to have your point of view on this, since you've been working in solar energy. You have seen the mini-grid solutions popping up for years now. So what are your views on this?
I think that in principle, having off-grid or mini-grid solutions is the only way to go. It's like we have the cell phone, and for many years we thought, no, these areas in Africa could not be connected to a phone network, and now they can, right? So I think that is definitely the way to go. But the most important part is to have the who owns it and who manages it, and how do you connect and of course, in many of the African countries, something that we in the research world you don't think about so much. There's a big issue with a currency conversion. That they don't have currencies that can be converted, like the beer in Ethiopia, for instance. You cannot trade that somewhere else. So when you get income for the mini grid in local currency, how do you pay for the panels? So if the panels are donated for the first time because you're starting to introduce something, they're donated by donors in the first time. Okay, but you still have to pay for new connections, new additions, and that is structuring that whole thing. The actual management of the mini grid solutions or community solutions is absolutely crucial for making them thrive. Without it, I think I saw somewhere, maybe it was for Burkina Faso, Marion, that the women who had no access to electricity could earn about $1 a day on what they were doing. And if they did have electricity to work with, they could earn maybe $10 a day. Now, it's an enormous difference. It's enormous. You take an incredible leap. And that example shows how important it is. Keep on going. We have to keep on providing. We have to keep on thinking, keep on planning. But that the biggest obstacle in my mind is not that we don't have technologies, that there are not solutions out there. It is the management of them once they are in place, so that somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, who actually invests their little resources in buying a welding machine, will be able to use it also 3 years down the line. And that is, otherwise we don't have adoption of these technologies because people are afraid. Naturally, I understand it.
Yeah, it's really a question of governance and trying to make people part of the solution by helping them design the answers and own what is a common good. We had at the beginning of the week, we had a discussion over the question of the right to energy. And I think that it totally puts things into this session today, totally puts things into perspective. So I think it was a very nice way to wrap things up and maybe now give the floor to Marielle Feenstra. Marielle, will you share your screen or do you want me to do it for you? You're muted.
Yeah, I would prefer if you could do it because sometimes it's getting a bit funny with Teams. So if
okay. So I will do it. There is a question in the chat. I think it's for Léonard. Léonard, if you don't mind answering directly to Jean-Yves Garnier. And I will share my screen and Marielle will draw some conclusions. So thank you so much, everyone. And time for a wrap up of this week.
Maureen?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying to see where to put my hand up, but I don't see it very well, how to raise my hand. Maybe just before Maureen speaks, if you'll give me a minute to add on to what Hanna had said.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Just to add on to what Hanna has said, I agree with all of it. I think also one thing that's very important for off-grid solutions to work is to pay attention to the conceptualization stage of a given project. That makes a big difference. How that is done at that point in time makes a big difference. There's also the aspect of ensuring that systems are put in place right from that very early stage to ensure that sustainability will be promoted right from that stage all the way. Community ownership should be one of the things that should be taken into account when talking about sustainability, and capacity building of these communities to be able to sustainably manage these community-based projects, because most of them until now are not into that. They have systems that are related, like for example, water management systems, which we can learn from, but so far those have not, I mean, there are similarities and differences. So there's those kinds of places and systems from which also we can learn from to make sure that the off-grid systems are realistic, practical, and are sustainable. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I'm sorry I didn't give you the floor earlier. It was to stay time bound, but you made a very, very relevant point. So thank you so much for speaking up. And okay, so now it's time to wrap up with Marielle. So do you see my screen? Please say yes.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Everybody, you can mute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. And maybe Marine, oh yeah, great. So yes, my name is Marielle Feenstra. I'm affiliated researcher at the Delft University from the Netherlands, and just recently elected as chair of the Engager Energy Poverty Research Network. What I really use in my work on gender and energy, because I'm a gender and energy researcher, is a very strong North-South perspective. I developed my gender lens on energy policy from empirical research in sub-Saharan Africa, Uganda, South Africa, Rwanda, Mali, Niger, in the beginning of this century. I'm that old. After some years outside academia, I returned to academia for my PhD thesis, in which I focused on energy transition in Europe. And I realized that using a gender lens, which is very much developed, the gender and energy nexus is very much developed in the global south with empirical data based on the global south, has been very instrumental, very useful in assessing energy policies from a gender perspective and a social inclusion perspective in the global north. So it's wonderful to be here and to wrap up this amazing week full of interaction of energy researchers working on such a global dimension. So it's interesting to hear all this interlinkages, because that is what the Sustainable Development Goals are emphasizing. The Sustainable Development Goals are addressing many issues that are related to the gender and energy poverty, water, health nexus. And what we know from the Sustainable Development Goals, that although it's a global commitment, it appeals to a national responsibility that is reflecting and resonating with the local action. It's not a north or either a south. No, it's a north, south, east, west collaboration that is necessary for addressing the Sustainable Development Goals and mitigating energy poverty and eradicating energy poverty in the end. So these Sustainable Development Goals are indeed interlinked and mutual reinforcing, and it's exciting to hear how many good practices there are across the world to address it. And we need platforms and conferences like this one this week to learn from those lessons. And if you look at the next slide, now, if we talk about energy poverty mitigations, what are the lessons that we can learn from the Global South from this international perspective? And it has been addressed today as well, that households are complex and fluid entities. In an energy transition, in an energy poverty mitigation projects, you see that the household, the end user, is the target of projects and policies. But then we need to acknowledge that households are not a homogeneous entity. They are, communities are not homogeneous. They reflect contextual factors, they reflect culture, they reflect social inequalities, they reflect an urban or a rural situation. So you need to know the context in which you work as an energy project or energy policy from energy policy perspective. Also, what we hear a lot is that cooking has a primary focus. So been working on energy projects for more than 20 years. I've seen my share in improved cookstoves projects, although it's still not an issue that is widely addressed at the national and international level. No, we really need energy efficiency also as a way to improve cooking and improve heating and cooling of houses. So energy poverty and the lack of access to clean and sustainable energies sources is very much linked to health issues. And in that sense, no, it's a human right. It's a human right issue as well, where health is acknowledged as a human right. Energy is not always acknowledged as a human right, as mentioned in at the first day of this conference. Also, what we hear a lot in projects and in research, that there's a lot of data collected. But again, to come back to my first point, households are fluids. Take a segregated data as a starting point for your projects and for your policies. So use intersectionality as a lens to reflect the diversity of the energy users in your projects, in your policy, but also in your research. If we look at local communities, and there we see, and especially within households, that there is still very much focus on the senior male household members for domestic energy technology investment. That is not a global south perspective. That is what we see in the global north as well, if we look at projects of energy communities, for example. So there is not a reflection of the diversity of households and diversity of users throughout different phases in policy and projects development for energy access. If we move to the next slide. So what we also learned this week is energy poverty has three interlinking perspectives, and each interlinking perspective has a gender or a social inclusion perspective as well. Now, the energy poor is also not a homogeneous group. Now, we have this social component, which is very much linked to culture, to gender norms, etc. But you have also the biological elements and the physiological element that has both an impact on how men and women are using energy, the needs they have, and the kind of rights they want to, they need to see their energy needs met. And of course, that's also linked to economic perspectives, and it's great to hear that in all these different sessions we heard this week, that an interlinked perspective and understanding and complex understanding of the concept of energy poverty is taken as well, is reflected in your projects and research. If you move on to the next slide, we see that within the energy system, there are three roles roughly that we can distinguish. It's the consumer, the producer, and the policymaker. And each role has also a gender dimension and has a contextual dimension. What we see in small microgrids projects and energy communities or local energy initiatives in Europe, for example, is that often this consumer and producer and policymaker or decision maker are interlinked roles, sometimes even manifested in one person. What we call the prosumer in the energy communities literature. So you both consume and produce your energy. What we miss in national energy policies and international conventions is the acknowledgement of the role of prosumer and the role of those men and women that are preparing and producing their own energy, whether it's through solar panels or whether it's through producing charcoal or using charcoal and whether to use firewood. So this consumer, producer, policymaker role is something to take into consideration when looking at energy projects and putting energy policy recommendations in line with your observations in research. Move on to the next slide. So in general, what are the conclusions we can draw based on the inputs you have given in the last couple of days? Is that context matter. Historical, cultural factors are stipulating the urgency and agency of energy users and the urgency for action towards eliminating and mitigating energy poverty. Also, disaggregate the energy user. Now, there is not one energy user. Energy users have different needs, have different roles, have different positions within their society and in the energy system they are in which they are placed. So, an intersectional and a holistic approach could safeguard gender-just energy policy, but could also safeguard energy policy of energy poverty mitigation projects and policies that are sustainable and efficient. And as we have seen today as well for example, in the proposal in the presentation on the LEAP project, is that international policy is often a driver for change, either in Europe, if we see at energy poverty projects that have been stimulated by the European Commission, or we see it in Africa or Asia and Latin America, where there's international donor agencies that are supporting energy efficiency projects or energy poverty mitigation interventions. Next slide. But what is lacking, or what I could focus on as a recommendation, is that place equality at the core of action. Implement an enabling policy. Now we heard about ownership and legal obstacles. We also heard today about finance options, not only in a lack of finance, or not if there is a finance and or a subsidy or a donor support program. If the finance stops, how is there a sustainable business case for these interventions, but also not more contextual elements like the lack of currencies or the exchange rates of some currencies. So there you see the financial support system is at all levels, both at the local level, at the national level, and the international level, is key for supporting energy poverty mitigation interventions. And use cross-sectoral coordination. Break the governance silos from policy, legislation, and implementation. Collaborate with community partners, not only in the energy sector, also outside the energy sector. Acknowledge your stakeholders and let them participate in your project and in all phases in your project design, and talk with them and interview them during your research. With that being said, I think I would like to thank you for your attention, for your collaboration, for your inspiration as well of all this wonderful research and projects that you have been presented over this week. And I wish you all a lot of inspiration and good luck and success in future projects. And hopefully we can meet each other one day in person and in new events. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all had a great meeting. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much to all the partners who made this week possible. Thank you so much, Manon. Thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you so much to all Engager, everyone at Engager. Thank you so much, Suds. Thank you really much to everyone who participated, and we hope we will be able to do this like Action Week next year. So just keep on looking at our website. We will see if we manage to just invite you to some kind of next steps. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And thank you for attending this focus today on Africa. And thank you so much, Marielle, for wrapping things up. Thank you and goodbye. And of course, thank you, Eva.